Hello and welcome. My name is Aurea Osgood and I'm the Learning Systems Manager at Winona State University in Southeast Minnesota. I'm going to share a little bit today about our creation of a template for our social work program in an attempt to reduce cognitive load. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's dive right in. So I'm going to start at the end, give you our spoiler in terms of what we hope that you will see at the end of this presentation, and that is that we can reduce extraneous cognitive load by creating shared templates within Brightspace and what that might look like. I'm going to talk about what extraneous cognitive load is. I'm also using the term template not just to talk about page templates in Brightspace, but to talk about them in a larger context, including home pages and navigation and content as well. So the plan and some questions that we will tackle in this presentation. We'll start with learning and cognitive load. Specifically, how do we learn and what gets in the way of learning? We'll talk about consistency and predictability, specifically looking at how do we address the challenges of learning. And finally, we'll take a tour of the template that was created for our social work program so you can see what this might look like by introducing consistency and predictability. So let's start by thinking about how we learn. This may be a review, but probably a good review for all educators. This graphic I'm going to show you was adapted. You can see the site at the bottom. So let's start with how we get new information. This is happening around us all of the time. You're probably right now hearing something, smelling something, reading something, touching something, perhaps you're tasting something. All of these stimuli are coming in at the same time. And this new information is processed through what's called our sensory memory. So our 5 senses all processing this information. Much of this is simply discarded. It's forgotten. Our brain says we do not need to remember what we're smelling right now, right? The smell at this moment is not important. At Christmas, at Hanukkah, at Easter, your brain may tell you this smell. You need to remember this smell. It reminds you of grandma. It reminds you of grilling with dad, whatever it might be. The information from our sensory memory needs to move towards long-term memory, and it gets processed through what's called our working memory. Our first goal as educators is to get students to move information from their sensory memory into their working memory. We have to somehow convince them that the information they're getting is important enough to retain. And we may do this by telling them the information will be on the quiz, or it's going to be part of an assigned homework. We do lots of things to convince them that, okay, tell your brain this is important to remember. Our working memory, of course, information here can once again be forgotten. Our working memory can actually only process a few things at once, typically 5 to 9 pieces of information. So if you are eating something that you can also smell, you're reading something on the screen, you're listening to an instructor speak, and you're touching your desk, that's 5 stimuli at once. That's as much as you can handle. So imagine if we were to take away some of those stimuli, right? We're better able to process this information. This is also why I'm presenting this particular model one piece at a time. If I gave you all of this model at once, it would be a lot to process, and your working memory may not encode it correctly. The next piece, once information is in our working memory, our goal is to encode it so that it moves into our long-term memory. And the long-term memory is where we store information in categories or schemes. For example, we might categorize things as types of butterflies or bones in the body. These categories are really important, and we can do a lot for our students by helping them create these categories and helping them encode this new information into the appropriate categories. So if we're talking about types of butterflies, it helps to remind them what else is in that category, what else types of butterflies may be related to that we've talked about in previously in the semester. When we practice using these categories, these schemes, they more easily develop, and it's easier for us to recall or retrieve this information later. Here too, we can help students by practicing and applying and testing their information. So lots of places in this process of learning. One, that we have potential problems, right? All the places we could forget information, and lots of opportunities for us to help students make the next step in this learning process. So what can go wrong? Plenty of things can go wrong, as we all know. So cognitive load refers to how much our working memory can process at any given time. And as educators, it's really important that we be aware of this. We want to design courses to ensure that students can prioritize learning our course content and not focus on trying to learn our course design. So how can we avoid overloading our learners without reducing what our learners are learning about the content? So there are three types of cognitive load. The first is called intrinsic cognitive load. And this is the inherent difficulty in processing information, regardless of how it's presented. Some information is simply more complex to understand and to remember. So naming the colors of the rainbow is far easier than understanding how a rainbow is created. So this intrinsic load is different for each person, different in different situations. And we'll talk about ways to reduce each of these. The second is what we call extraneous cognitive load. And this is the way information is presented and how easy or difficult it is for a learner to process it. And this, again, varies by person, but also by the environment. This may be physical environment, or in the case of today's presentation, the digital environment. So consider learning in a quiet classroom versus trying to learn while you're on a busy subway. This is the noise that we're going to try to address today. The third type is germane cognitive load, and this is the effort needed to use memory and intelligence to process information into the categories of the long-term memory. So we aim to optimize germane load. This is not something we want to reduce or remove. This is just something that we want to optimize and fully understand. So how are some ways we can address these three types of cognitive load in teaching and in design? So let's first look at intrinsic. So as I said, some information is simply easier to learn. Some is more difficult to learn. So naming the 4 chambers of the heart is easier than learning how to diagnose heart disease. There are pedagogical things that we can do as instructors that can make this learning easier. For example, we can build content from simple concepts, building up to complex concepts. We can chunk information into small, more manageable bites. We can sequence our content in logical ways. We can scaffold larger assignments, right? And these are all things that for those of us lucky enough to have had formal training in teaching, we learned these things, right? Helping students build those categories in their long-term memory is going to be helpful. What about germane? Recall this is the movement from short-term into long-term, so we need to help students make connections with their categories. So we might want to connect old and new material. It might help to summarize information at the end of a presentation, reviewing and previewing material at the beginning and end, creating concept maps to help students understand how different pieces are related. And where we're going to focus today is on the extraneous domain. Again, this is the noise that gets in the way of our learning. So this is where good instructional design and designers and educators really come in, reducing and removing the noise that gets in the way of learning. All right, so research on learning repeatedly reports that learning is improved with consistency and predictability. And we know this as well in developmental psych literature, that kids who have consistent schedules, predictable schedules, do better because they know what to expect, right? Many people will say, I don't like surprises. So not only in reviewing content for students, but also in terms of how learners are presented with information and in how they are instructed on how to process that information. So we may tell our students that it's important to find a good study space and return to that space. Find a good way of taking notes that works for you. Get enough sleep each night. All of these habits are really important for learning. Okay. Also important is knowing expectations. So when students know what the due date is, when they know how to write a lab report or what kind of format you want an assignment in, how many students they should respond to in a discussion forum, knowing these expectations is really important as well. There's often a desire and sometimes even pressure to implement the newest, coolest tool, to add colors and images to our learning management systems, but often these additions are not in fact about learning and may hinder learning. A clean design is what's best for learning. When students have the good habits and when they know the expectations, what we find is that these students are better able to transfer information from their working to their long-term memory, to apply their learning to new situations, to transfer their skills to other classes, and to better retrieve information later, not just at the test or at the end of the semester, but throughout their program. So that's our goal, right? Is student learning. So keeping all of these things in mind, I worked with the social work program at our university. This is an undergraduate program. This is an in-person program, although they also have a hybrid and a fully online program. Our social work program is a cohort program, meaning that students start and finish the program with the same students and courses in the same order. And this made for a really good test case since their final 2 years are with the same group of students and in the same order. We didn't find that it was going to be helpful to create templates for general education programs, program courses, because these courses would be in such a variety of departments across campus. But these final 2 years, the social work specific courses would be this good test. This program is made up of full-time faculty as well as adjuncts. So the templating was particularly helpful for adjuncts so that they didn't have to worry about the design component. Many of these adjuncts are practitioners and may not be seasoned teachers. The full-time faculty were the ones that came up with the design that you're going to see. We did this in several ways. So our goal was to reduce extraneous cognitive load by creating these shared templates. And once again, I'm talking about templates bigger than just the individual content pages, as you'll see in just a moment. So we did this in a few ways. So I'm going to walk us through a couple of pages in Brightspace to see what they look like. All right, so the first thing we did was created a couple assets, one of which is the common navigation menus. So we removed any unnecessary menu items that we were not using either as a university or for the program. We also created a custom banner, and each course within the program will be using a version of this image. So the colors may be reversed, the angle may be switched or reversed, and things like that. But these three colors primarily will be used in each course. We also created a common welcome message, and this welcome message was important for a few reasons. One, we included personalization with the student's name at the beginning. We included both a video and a text welcome. There was an invitation to ask questions, hyperlinks to the next step, and a clear action item for students. And again, these are in-person students, but we wanted to make sure that we were giving them clear directions at each step. We also created a series of common widgets. The calendar, which of course is built into Brightspace. We also created instructor contact information widget, which will include a photo, as well as links to their office location, phone, and text, which we just recently got, and to Zoom. We also created a social work resources widget that has quick access to Code of Ethics, the accreditation standards, and the department website. Once in the course, we also, I apologize for the early box there, we added the mission statement to our syllabus page. And a common syllabus. So we broke this down into several pages within the Brightspace content area. Each course obviously will have some specific course information, the course description, the instructor, but students will know, they'll be able to predict where that information is. We also added a resources module in the content area that includes links to faculty pages, paperwork for the program admissions and internships, links to the department website, and other common places across campus. The biggest work that was done was actually in the module pages themselves. So each module will include first the new logo that the department created, an introduction to the module itself, including the dates of the module and a brief description of what will be covered in the module, a time estimate, which for in-person classes will include the number of in-class period meetings as well. Clear learning outcomes, which follow all of our best practices. They are measurable, etc. And finally, a to-do list. And the to-do list includes common icons. So those students that like to see an image, they have that. There are due dates included in every assessment component. There is a clear action item, attend, read, review, complete, and hyperlinks to each of the activities, lessons, assignments, discussions, etc. So each page in each course of the social work program will include this welcome to the module. We've also been working on specific pages for content pages as well, but that is the next step. So faculty are very excited about this. This will be rolling out officially in the fall. We had a couple faculty do some preliminary kind of beta testing this spring, and students responded very well. Admittedly, for some faculty, this was a fairly major shift in how they presented content in Brightspace, but they were all on board. So fingers crossed that will continue. But students have been very pleased, appreciative of the effort that certainly goes into creating these and then populating them with the correct information. So as a very simple conclusion, one way we can reduce cognitive load, specifically extraneous cognitive load, is by creating shared Brightspace templates, shared formatting and design to reduce the noise. Students will have habits, they will know exactly where to go, they will have clear expectations, and things will be predictable in each course. They can focus on the content as opposed to trying to learn a new design in every course during their college experience. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a great day.